Hi, this is Andrew, and this is Keen On, the daily now.tv chat show with some of the world's leading thinkers and writers. Hello, everybody. The news, I'm afraid, on the environmental front remains dire. Earlier this week, the world's top scientists expect that global heating is going to go past the 1.5 centigrade target. Many of them are imagining that the world is about to literally boil. Some believe that it will go to 2.5. It speaks of the way in which, in a way, the climate crisis is a kind of hell. The world is boiling over, and one man who's been observing it and writing about it for many years is our guest. He has a new book out, appropriately enough, called Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology. He's a very distinguished professor of English. He's written 20 books, many about the environment, and he's joining us from his home in Houston, Texas. Tim, this word hell, you use it carefully. What do you mean by it?
Thank you for having me. Gosh, that news, it makes me think of one of the things that I say in the book, actually, Andrew, which is that there's this real way in which people like me, people who talk about the science in the media, end up accidentally sounding like we're out of the book of Revelations, right? You see this incredible statistic, and I just saw it today, and I was just leveled by it. And you just sort of think to yourself, what am I supposed to do with this, And it's a little bit like reading the book of Revelations, right? It's a little bit like giant dragon emerges from ocean. It's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Then you open up the middle of the paper. So if page one tells you that you're stupid, as well as that you're doomed, right? And you open up the paper in the middle, Eeyore, I won't name names here, but just let's call this person Eeyore. An environmentalist writer called Eeyore is telling you that you're a bad person. You're evil. You're thinking about this wrong. You're doing it wrong. You're the reason why this is happening. And, in many ways, please forgive me. I often feel like I get paid to say the wrong thing in public. But to some extent, these guys might as well be working for big oil because they make you feel really paralyzed, right? So page one, stupid, middle of the newspaper, evil, stupid and evil is not a good place from which to launch the kind of planet scale awareness and action that is required, and another reason why this is hell is, so my daughter came in the kitchen a few years ago and she was crying and she'd been watching a school shooting video on YouTube. She was 19 years old and she said, "Daddy, we're in hell." Gosh, yeah, actually, found that really hard to deal with when I first heard it. And I sort of thought, how do I deal with this? Right? She's crying. She reads a lot about the environment. She really, really cares about it. And so I sort of thought, what do you do as a parent when you're confronted with your kid? And I have a lot of people who are high school students who read my stuff, and they sort of rely on the things that I say, and so part of it is helping, like a responsible adult, to helping younger people to scream appropriately about what's going on, So anyway, I said to Claire, "Okay, Claire, so this is hell. This is hell." And into the kitchen walked Oliver, the cat. And I thought, well, yeah, Oliver's in hell, right? Because this is hell and we're in hell, and Oliver's in hell, and we still have to feed Oliver, even though we're in hell. And all of a sudden, there was this little light bulb went over my head, and I was like, oh, book. Because one of my very, very favorite writers, William Blake, is all about how to live in hell, actually. And so with William Blake as a kind of a guide, some hell needs a guide, right? And I'm sort of walking around the issues of our day, the burning, literally one, that you just mentioned.
It's a fascinating title of a book, Tim, Hell in Search of a Christian Ecology, because, of course, hell was a notion, a term, a word that was central to Christianity itself. how reliant are you on notions of hell to
Mm.
come up with what you call this Christian ecology?
Well, I just gave a little lecture whose title was "This is Hell," and the subtitle was "It's Not the End of the World." Yeah. Many Christians right now are in fact focusing on the notion.
Yeah, I've got the headline for that even. I knew you were going to say that. This is hell, it's not the end of the world, which is also very provocative.
See, the thing is, to me, I'd rather be in hell than anticipating the end of the world. At least psychologically speaking, if you know already that the bad thing happened already, then you can sort of weirdly relax. If you're warding it off, right, who knows what kind of violence you might do. And of course, in the name of heaven on earth, many people who call themselves Christians have created this hell. I mean, there are these two frat boys, I don't know what their names are, but they're Texan, and they basically say, if God had wanted us not to drill in the Arctic, he would have told us explicitly not to drill in the Arctic. So he does want us to drill in the Arctic. And there's another Texan guy who claims to be a born and again Christian, who's all about drilling down 30,000 feet below the Dead Sea to find the oil, right? Because he's sort of figured it out from reading the Bible. And so, you know, in the name of heaven, in the name of increasing happiness, right, in the name of some kind of ideal world, people are willing to do very bad things. And I think also right now with the rise of fascism, right, like a fascist is someone who knows they're the goody, right? Like in a funny, paradoxical way, a good definition of evil, and this is where I am using a lot of theology, really, and sort of thinking through it. Evil is very much how you think about what evil is, right? If you think evil is a thing in other people or a kind of thing in me, but I can get rid of it, right? And I can be the goody, then kind of that is evil. Like genuinely conscience, right? Like a genuinely spiritual religious attitude would imply, I am the evil that I'm seeing in the world. I'm the evil, right? Like being a good parent, I hope, please agree with me, is like feeling like you're a bit of a rubbish parent. You know, being a truly great country, as in make America great at all, would be thinking that you might be a bit of a rubbish country. And this is where awareness of the legacy of slavery comes in, right? And to go back to the theological issue, right? So we have religion because in a way there is this master, this perfect master. We think of God as the master. The whole problem is master versus slave, really. And you can't serve this master properly, so you have religion, right? Now imagine the inverse of that, right? Like imagine the perfect servant, right? This servant does everything you ever ask them to do perfectly, including all the unintended consequences, right? Every story you've ever heard about the devil, right? We're doing the same with AI right now. It's like, let's create the perfect servant. What could go wrong? And in a funny way, the biosphere is being treated like that, right? Like, this is the perfect servant that will give us for free all the goodies that we want. What could go wrong, right? You wash your hands with antibacterial soap. You cause the bacteria to evolve. You buy an avocado from Chile and you waste a lot of gasoline, right? The biosphere is also a thing that does exactly what you tell it to do. Yeah, no more, no less. And so in a funny way, yeah, we have to sort of make a deal in a way with the devil. And I'm rather opposed to the kind of environmentalism that is so holier than thou that it cannot compromise. There's so much of that in going on right now, and there's so much pointing and yelling and you're evil, and you know, there's no kind of, since I see this trouble in the world, I would like to admit that it's my fault, right? I think also that religion provides a kind of model for a kind of planet scale awareness, right? Like, what have we got out there in the international sphere? We've got corporations, we've got transnational religions, we've got fantastic new American exports like Black Lives Matter and Me Too, right? And I think about Martin Luther King. You know, I think about Martin Luther King and Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream, right? And it's like, where is the I Have a Dream vibe of planet scale action? Like, why don't people get out of bed thinking, wow, solving global warming is the sexiest, most amazing thing I ever thought of doing, because it's the biggest problem on Earth. So it's the greatest one to solve. Let's do it. Because somebody like me didn't do the I Have a Dream, right? I Have a Dream gave even racist people an off-ramp so they could get into civil rights, right? Martin Luther King didn't stand up and go, you have no idea how racist you are. You're never going to get out of your paralysis. You're so bad. He said, I have a dream. Right? He's vulnerable enough to sort of say the thing that you say to your best person when they're like 2 millimeters away from you and you're just waking up. I have a dream. So it was both really open to the future and really, really vulnerable. And where's that kind of thing, right? That's a religion thing. That's because King was highly trained as a minister, I think, right? And this is a kind of at bottom, it's a theological scale problem because it deals at the very least with all the horrible, primitive, basic feelings that theology also deals with, whether that be Buddhism, which I studied a lot, or Christianity, Judaism, Islam. They're all like the rota-rooter of the self, right?
So, Tim, the book comes with the subtitle In Search of a Christian Ecology. If I hadn't heard the subtitle, listening to you, or at least some of what you said, you seem to be suggesting that Christianity is the problem, not the solution. In your view, are there two kinds of Christianity? The frat boys who go to church on a Sunday and want to destroy the environment, and the MLKs of the world, or at least the ecological MLKs of the world, who want to address our global crisis. Is that what you're saying? And
yeah,
in an odd kind of way, is that a very Christian Manichaean way? Or I mean, maybe Manichaeanism isn't really Christianity, but is it a heaven and hell way of thinking about things?
Well, so, I have a tendency to provoke and annoy people. And this book might provoke and annoy different types of people. It might provoke and annoy people who think they're religious, and it might provoke and annoy people a lot like me, like scholars who say that they aren't, right? And there's a sort of a problem here because, people like me drop the ball on talking religion, right? So we have the religion department. But when was the last time a white guy in a university felt okay to say, Jesus didn't mean that? Yeah, like since I can only take responsibility for the world that I see, that's sort of a fair position. Then in a funny, horrible, twisted way, people like me created MAGA. First of all, we created the internet and then just let it be deregulated so that fascism could easily just seep into it. It was just like the Wild West, right? Look at this thing. What could go wrong? We work in these monasteries. We're really safe. We don't have to worry about anything. And we stopped talking morality and religion, right? In a certain way, we stopped saying it. And I think, to go back to your question here, this is very, controversial if you are into talking theology, right? To say that this is good Christianity and this is not the good Christianity, right? But I'm just going to come right out and say the European white one, yeah, as far as I'm concerned, in a way, is the war against the Holy Spirit, right? The war of settler colonialism, for example, against all those cultures that were defined as animist, right? Like they believe that trees are people, and that things that we call inanimate objects are alive. And that pejorative term animism, right, is a war literally against spirit, right? It's like an assault in a certain way on the Holy Spirit, right? And, whereas there are some very scary Christians on the TV, when I watch the TV with my wife, Trina, and her mum in Montego Bay, they're glued to American TV, like what's going to happen next, right? And they see Trinity Broadcasting Network, and you see these people, these basically, they call themselves white Christian nationalists, but really it's just fascism. I'm sure Hitler would have said the same thing. And they're saying very scary, sinister things in a very scary way. It's the way they do it, this kind of hard, metallic kind of, can I get an amen kind of a way, right?
So what is it about Christianity, Tim, that attracts, at least in your view, the best and the worst of us? It seems as if, on the one hand, it attracts these very mean-spirited, very selfish, perhaps evil people, and on the other hand, some of the best of us. What is it about this thing we call religion or Christianity?
Right, on Christianity in particular. So I am a long-time student of Buddhism. I started studying it when I was very young, and I really got into it seriously when I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I have a Buddhist meditation teacher, and I've studied Vajrayana, which is the really esoteric Buddhism, you know, and I studied that for years thinking, thank goodness I'm not one of those awful Christian people, especially not one of those evangelical people. And then this weird thing happened to me in the middle of writing this book, which we might get to. But from that point of view, Christianity is a very esoteric, very high level teaching, right? And you don't want to get, and from the Buddhist point of view, you don't want to give that teaching out, as they say, the analogy, like milk in the marketplace, because people aren't ready for it, right? They might take this stuff about everything's actually okay and you're fundamentally good and everything's good to mean the contents of my mind and everything that I'm thinking is great and I can do whatever I want, including invading Vietnam and killing whatever I want and creating nuclear bombs and slavery and stuff, because God told me to do it, right? Without any safety. Yeah. It's very esoteric. It's incredibly high level from that point of view. And it's kind of like, I'm not saying for a moment that, you know, it should be restricted to a few people. And I'm sure that what I'm saying sounds horribly elitist. And I am very much a very smart guy who's benefited hugely and been hugely privileged by being in this incredible university position. Yeah. But, you know, if you're going to teach Christianity to people, you've got to have your mind and your soul and your heart together. Because it's really powerful stuff. And having just returned to it after a very long kind of all kinds of prodigal son, intellectual and otherwise detour, I'm looking at it going, wow, this is outrageous, really. This is like, wow, you know, and they let people have this without a lot of care, you know. And again, I'm going to just say the white version of it. Oh dear. You know, go on YouTube, do yourself a favor and look up Grace Jones has a brother. I didn't know Grace Jones has a brother, but Trina introduced me to Noel Jones, Bishop Noel Jones, right? And if you go on YouTube, you put Noel Jones, I've got to get myself together, you're going to see black Pentecostalism. And it's going to be very different from the Trinity Broadcasting Network. Let's just put it that way. It's going to be like Grace Jones, but it's Grace Jones's brother.
Well, I hope you're not encouraging people to leave my show, Tim, and go on YouTube. Because we've still got half of the interview to go. I want to thank our friends at Liberties, an excellent new publication, a quarterly journal of culture and politics, who have tremendously innovative, unique writers, voices like, I don't think, Tim, you've been in the magazine, but you should be. I'm going to run a short feature about Liberties, and then we'll be back with Timothy Morton to talk more about how we can find our way out of hell and find what he calls a Christian ecology. So don't go away, anyone. Don't go to hell. We'll be back in a second.
The noise, there is nuance, insight. Liberties is not just a journal of ideas. It's a meteor of intelligent substance. It's the place to be for engaged citizens. Politics, opinion, substance. Liberties is a triumph for freedom of thought, a quarterly of urgency, of cultural exploration, of intellectual delight, of immaculate prose. It's invaluable. Subscribe now or find Liberties at your favorite bookseller.
And you can subscribe to Liberties at libertiesjournal.com. We are speaking with Timothy Morton, the author of Hell in Search of a Christian Theology. If you're a Twitter person, an X person, you'll know Timothy Morton as at the Eco Thought. That's his identity online. He's a professor in the English department at Rice University. This very distinguished writer, has written many books, mostly about the environment. Tim, you come to this from a literary rather than a scientific point of view. Critics might say, well, why does an English professor write so much about the environment? Why doesn't he go into science?
Mm-hmm. The way in which we talk about ecological things is in this little ghetto of science. I'm going to call it scientism, right? Scientism, which is different from science, which has more in common with religion than you might think. Really nice religion, anyway. Scientism is a kind of religion of science, right? And the problem with scientists and journalists who talk science about ecology on the TV is they don't realize they're in a belief space where they are being seen as trying to get people to replace their beliefs with the scientist belief, right? They don't know that because why? Because they didn't take an English class with Professor Tim, who would tell them, sorry, a bit arrogant, who would tell them that how you say something, right, including the environment around how you say it, the discursive context of it, how you say it is what you're saying, right? That's what you learn when you read a poem, right? How the poem happens is the poem. And this is actually also science, right? Because salt is a thing that dissolves in water. That's the how of salt, right? If you want to know about what salt is, you look at how it behaves, right? And the fancy word for this in my neck of the woods is phenomenology, right? A word that has always really attracted me. And what it kind of just means, the how is the what, right? I already gave an example of this, like how you think evil is evil, right? If you think evil is like a nasty little smoking lump of something that you can fly a plane into, or you can fly a drone over it, then that kind of is evil, right? That attitude is evil, right? Knowing that the evil is actually stuck to you permanently, aka the notion of original sin, right? Like structural racism. It's like you can relax in a way. It's not, you didn't do it. It's sort of there, right? Like, look at this whiteness here. It's like a structurally racist thing about me. I didn't choose it, but it's there, right? And it's like, so I can sort of relax, although I feel responsible for it and not a little bit guilty. But remember, only a psychopath has no guilt, right? Like a little bit of guilt and shame never did anybody any harm. And knowing that evil is like, you're a little bit evil, is maybe a kind of safety, right? There are a lot of, as it were, demonic angels in the world, right? Like people who think they're the goody acting in a demonic way, right? Like I'm sure the people who invaded the Capitol building on the 6th of January thought they were the goodies, right? Whereas I would rather be an angelic demon. You know, I'd rather be a sort of recovering demon who knows that they're a bit of a demon and can be a bit of a monster, right? And that's sort of like the safety, right? If you know, if you kind of own your aggressive impulses, and I speak here as a graduate of about 25 years of psychoanalysis and a few years of EMDR therapy, and it's like if you know that the bad stuff isn't in other people, it's also in here, then that's kind of like, it's a bit.
Are you saying, Tim, that you use this term scientism? Are you suggesting that science, and you use the E word several times, the 4-letter E word, evil, that science itself is evil? Because some people might be listening to this and saying, this guy's interesting, he's clearly very well read, he's very entertaining, but why don't we just find a scientific, a technological solution to this global warming crisis? It's got nothing to do with morality. It's got to do with what people are inventing. How would you respond to that?
No. So again, like it's science is definitely not evil. I'm definitely on the side of science, and this book is very much trying to talk science to Christianity and vice versa in an interesting way. There's so much evolution theory in the book. There's so much quantum theory in the book. I spent all my life reading nature physics, and my uncle was a biochemist who researched the placenta. His work is also in the book. Actually, I would love to go into it, but it's a bit intricate. So I mean, I've been reading Darwin and Dawkins and Dennett and all those people for many years, right? And I study quantum theory and astrophysics, and I just really think people like me should know these things, right? So it's not that really. It's that so check it out. We know what to do. We know what to do. We know to stop carbon emissions now, right? Why aren't we doing it, right? Advertising, it gives you a reason to buy the thing, right? There's a reason to buy it, you know? Or as William Burroughs would say, that the junkie sells the dealer sells the junkie to the heroine, not the heroine to the junkie, right? No one's given us a reason to buy into stopping global warming yet, right? No one's given us the how to think it, right? So this book is a sort of ad for how someone or someones might go about doing that, and I like the appropriate level, the appropriate sound to make. So, for example, my friend Adam McKay, bless him, did a beautiful film called Don't Look Up with a thing called Hyperobject Industries, which he created based on a book that I'd written. And if you remember that film, it's about a comet that's coming to destroy the Earth, and the mainstream media won't cover it. Well, guess what? Christian fundamentalist Joe truck driver from my hometown of Houston, already knows that there's a comet coming to destroy the Earth and that the lamestream media won't cover it. It's called the Book of Revelation. But Joe Truck Driver knows something that that film doesn't know, right? Because unfortunately, by accident, that film, although it's in the language of science, is in the how of the science is the key of revenge. You're going to be laughing on the other side of your face when you find out the science was right, you know. And so it's kind of like Old Testament revenge, actually. And Joe Truck Driver has the antidote. Yeah, and I'm afraid the stupidest version of this antidote is better than revenge. Ready? Jesus loves him anyway. Until people like me look to mercy and forgiveness, and Jesus loves you anyway, we're never going to get Joe Truck Driver to care at all about stopping global warming, because he's got something better than what the eco people are selling, which, pardon me, isn't science. It's very primitive religion. It's revenge speak in the language of science, but what's really being sold is revenge. And no one wants to get out of bed thinking, wow, an angry God of the earth is going to kill me. So maybe I should just crawl back into bed now. Or an angry God of capitalism is going to kill me, so maybe I should just crawl back into bed now. All these sort of gods, right? And like the people like me who think they don't believe in something might be more dangerously religious than the people who know they do, right? The God that people like me unbelieve in, right, the sort of trendy atheism, right, often tends to be this kind of tyrannical dictator, yeah, and it scares me. And William Blake, who's in this book all over the place, has a great name for this kind of God, whether this be the God of capitalism or the God of science or the God of whatever, or the God of certain fundamentalism, is Nobo Daddy, right? Nobo Daddy. He's your daddy, and he's nobody. He's nobody as in the form of your daddy. And that kind of language of Nobo Daddy, whether it be scientific language or religious language, is like, no, that's the paralyzing, crushing, enslaving language, right? And we need another way of talking about this. We need an I have a dream way.
So you noted that you just gave a lecture suggesting that it may be hell, but it's not the end of the world. We still live in this place, and we got to deal with it. And the question then becomes how to live in a catastrophe. An interesting piece in New Yorker magazine that you were referenced in. Are you trying to, and again, I use this word, I guess, carefully, resurrect agency within a Christian ecological framework in this book?
Yeah, it's like you've got the controls, you know, you've got the controls. All the lovely things about religion are all the lovely things about yourself as a life form, right? All the things about, for example, mercy, you know, like when you're in the middle of a fight and someone's about to hit you, or you're like, wait a minute, why am I doing this to the other person? Like, I could just stop. And you have this funny moment of hesitation. It's like the atomic structure of mercy. Like, wait a minute, this is stupid. Yeah. Or when you see, you know, a cop strangling a black person in the street, and you're like, for pity's sake, right? These spontaneous feelings that we have are all the juicy, lovely things about religion, spirituality. And I argue in the book that these things are actually key to the fact that we are biological beings who grew out of a biosphere, right? And if you ever want to know what it's like to be a life form, you should really talk to religion and not to Richard Dawkins. You should really talk to especially esoteric type contemplative parts of religion that have this idea, right? Like, we are part of this thing, or we have access to this thing, but we can never fully grasp or own this thing. And our job is really just to sort of know that, right? There's a very beautiful Christian meditation manual from the Middle Ages called The Cloud of Unknowing. And the instruction is in the title, right? It's like, just be a cloud of unknowing. Like, just, I don't know, right? Like, your basic, just aliveness is all that you need, really, to know why to care, right? And actually, you know, you come to realize that the universe is a beautiful accident. If science teaches us anything, it's that the life is a beautiful accident, right? That's based on sexual display, totally open and random, and in a way meaningless, and random mutation, which is also doesn't have a point to it, and symbiosis, like random encounters between strangers, or as they would say, neighbors in Islam, Christianity, and Judaism, right? And that's why to care, because we live in this beautiful accident world that we could easily turn into a world of chemical revenge, right? Like this molecule eats that molecule, this black hole sucks that this in, right? Like that's the mechanical chemical universe, but life is a place in the universe where the universe is having mercy on itself, right? But we could turn it back into chemicals by sucking chemicals out of the ground and burning them in our cars and like have a lovely, nice, boring cartoon world. And that really would be the end of the world, right? Because it would be a lot of extinction would happen. I don't know if people know this, but the extinction event to compare this to is the fourth one, which was a global warming one, which wiped out all but 4% of life on Earth. The asteroid that hit the dinosaurs was nothing by comparison to the global warming one called the End Permian. Yeah.
This is the Anthropocene debate that you're also very involved in. Tim, are you suggesting you live in Houston? You're all too familiar with the two Americas. You used to live in Boulder and Davis, California, up the road from me. So you're very, as I said, familiar with the two Americas. Are you suggesting that a Christian ecology could also not only be effective in addressing hell on earth, but also bring Americans back together again?
I really, really am. And I'm so glad you asked that. I really, truly am. I really think that if people like me were a little bit brave and just started saying, you see, when the Sex Pistols went on TV, they said very rude words for most people. But the rude words in my world are words like pray and Jesus. Yeah, if people like me, we could say things like pray and Jesus on the TV a bit more, it might actually really, really help, you know? And I like to see the good in things. Yeah. And I do live in this town where there are many, many different people. It's an incredibly diverse place to live, Houston. Yeah. And we had this massive hurricane in 2017. And during the hurricane, there was this very interesting feeling, which was, do you know what? I don't really care how you voted. I actually don't care. I just want to make sure that you're safe. There was a very good feeling, right? And if people like, you know, who had just voted, whichever way they'd voted, could do that in this town of Houston, then that could be a model, right? And so I feel like my work is like trying to model this. And if anything, Christianity is like how you coexist with your fellow people, and how we treat each other, of course, is how we treat the biosphere. So very high on my list is ending racism, white supremacy, right? That's very high on my list. Is like, because how we treat each other is how we treat, you know, forgive the silly analogy, the bunny rabbits, right? We're never going to get that bit right if we don't start treating each other right. Plus also treating each other right just ends up feeling really good, you know, and taking some responsibility for this world that we're in.
Tim, finally, earlier this week, I did a show with Derek Black, whose father was a grand wizard of the KKK. He has changed his mind about the world and has written a memoir suggesting that his father and his uncle or his godfather are all wrong. David Duke. What happens to those people in the world? Because you're never going to change everyone's mind. What happens to you've talked a lot about racism in this conversation. What happens to the racists, particularly in the white community, but perhaps elsewhere as well? What becomes of them in a world where people come together?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, we've all got PTSD from 500 years of slavery, and one way of acting it out is the fascism. Yeah. And the trouble with fascism is it's like what Hannah Arendt says, right? All you need to be a fascist is to hit retweet. All you need to do is to be just following orders, which is why her book is called The Banality of Evil, which can be misinterpreted to mean that evil is banal. But what she really means is that banality is evil. She's talking about the evil of banality, right? The fact that, you know, you don't have to even believe in an anti-Semitic blood libel. You just have to hit retweet on a meme, right? And so the problem that we've got right now are people who are being told that they know, right? They know that, for example, people like me, a pedophile lizard from space who mostly drinks baby's blood, the QAnon thing, they know, right? There are gangs of people from Idaho knocking on doors asking if you're a Democrat. This is happening. I alarmed the house I was living in because Trina's mum was terrified of people knocking on the door like that, right? And so it is a question like, what happens to those people, right? So what happened in Germany after World War II, right? Like, people had to go through a serious process of actually becoming human beings again.
Re-education. Maybe we'll have to send them all to Rice to attend one of your classes.
Well, wouldn't that be lovely? Because then I'd be rolling in the money and rolling in the clover, and I'd be more than happy to teach anybody, actually.
And they'll have to read the book too. Hell, Tim, right?
I would love it if everyone did.